Welcome to another Playskript tutorial. For almost any project you do, you are going to need to display some text. In this video, we are going to show you all the cool things that you can do with the write command. To get started, we are going to open a resource window and drag a text element. So now what you can see here is the write command, and the first thing that we can do is actually change this text. So you can see now that this is the text. The other two parameters are just the coordinates and the size. And just like with many other elements, we can use live edit to change both the coordinates and the size of this element. It gets more interesting when we add an extra parameter with some attributes, some styling attributes that we're going to use to change how our text looks like. For example, the easiest one to use is just the color. So we can define a color and we can say that this text is actually going to be dark red. And when we do this, sure enough, the text turns dark red. We can also change the background. For example, we can have a black background for our text. We can also use RGB values for the color. And one advantage of that is that you now have a little bit more control over the exact color of this text. In fact, you can use the live edit functionality, for example, to change exactly how this text is displayed. Now, I want to show you some other things that you can use, some other attributes that you can use as part of the write command. But before we do that, we are going to draw just a little reference line here so that it's a little bit easier to see how things are positioned. So here, we're just drawing a line. And what we're going to do is we are going to set x coordinates and y coordinates for this line so that they match the coordinates of the text. So for example, we can just write this line at coordinates px and py, and similarly write the text at coordinates px and py. And so now what you can see is that the coordinates of the text box exactly correspond to the upper left corner of the text box. Now, we can change that by using the center x and center y attributes. So by default, these attributes are set to 0. But we can change them. We can change them either manually or using the live edit functionality. And so now if we move center x from 0 to 1, it goes from aligning to the left to aligning to the right. If we put it at 0.5, it aligns exactly in the middle. Same thing for the y coordinate. We can align it at the top, in the middle, or the bottom of the text box. And so in this way, we have full control over exactly how this text is aligned. Now, in many situations, it's actually pretty necessary to write text that spans multiple lines. For example, we can say here that we have a piece of text that should be hello world in 2 lines. All right, so we're just using the \n escape character for a new line. But if you really want to write multiple lines, this can get a little bit painful. So instead, what we can do is we can use raw strings. So those are delimited by the back quote, similar to JavaScript. And so now we can actually introduce line breaks directly into the string and have the text displayed like this in multiple lines. Notice that even if we write some escaped characters, we actually just see the actual \n. So what this is going to do is really just show us exactly the text that is being displayed, that is being written here in the code. We'll actually find this very useful as part of the next bit of functionality that I want to show you. This is a bit of functionality that I actually quite like because it's very useful when writing technical content, and it's the ability to write math. So one of the things Playskript supports is these notations, similar to LaTeX, for writing math formulas. So what I can do is I can use these $2 in order to write some math notation here. So for example, I can say alpha underscore 1 squared plus alpha underscore 2 squared. And I want to say that this is equal to beta squared. And surprise, we get some math notation. We can even do fractions. For example, we can say there's a fraction here, and we are going to call it frac. And we can say that this is going to be x plus y divided by x minus y. And when we do this, we even get our fractions. So this is really, really useful when we are writing, for example, mathematics, or when we're doing physics, or really pretty much any kind of technical content. Another functionality, another feature that is really, really useful is the ability to use multiple styles within the same text box, within the same write command. So in order to enable this functionality, we're first going to use an attribute that is going to be called multi-style. So we set multi-style to true, and what this gives us is it gives us the ability to have multiple styles. For example, for the color, I can tell it that I now want two colors. I want black and I want dark red. So now I can use a pound to switch from one color to the other. So for example, I can use a pound here to switch from black to red, and then I can use another pound to switch back from red to black. And so the effect is that this formula is now dark red. I can also do something similar with fonts. So for example, I can tell it that I want Arial switching to Times New Roman. And so what you see is that now when I display, the math text is rendered in Times New Roman, but the rest of the text is rendered as Arial. And so in this way, I can have very, very fine control over how individual pieces, individual elements of my text are displayed. Now, once you display the text, you actually have the ability to change it later. In order to do that, the first thing you need is to get a handle to the text. Right? So now this variable txt contains a handle to the text that was created by this write command. And so now, for example, when I click on the screen, what I want is I want something to happen to the text. For example, a really useful command is the update command. What the update command allows me to do is it allows me to modify, after the fact, any of these attributes that are used to style the text. For example, I can tell it that when I click, I want the colors now to be black followed by, for example, blue. And so what happens then is that I have my text that is rendered, but I also have this handler so that when I click, the text changes color. And I can do this for many other attributes. I can also, for example, move the text. I can move the text down by 10 steps so that when I click, in addition to changing color, it also moves around. There are many other attributes and many other aspects of how you can control how your text is displayed. The best way for you to learn about them is to look in the documentation for the write command, as well as for many of the different object transformations that are supported by it. As usual, the best way to learn Playskript is to actually play with it. So try it out and enjoy.